Today on Home Care Heroes, we have Melissa Bagley from Steve the Hurricane's organization, and the topic is adaptation. We also have some breaking news. Speaking of adaptation, Steve the Hurricane's organization is rebranding as Home Care Evolution. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Home Care Heroes podcast, featuring trending topics and practical wisdom for success in home care. Here's your host, Ken Accardi.
Well, hello, and welcome to today's episode of Home Care Heroes. We have a very special guest whose name is Melissa Bagley, and today we're going to talk all about adapting your home care agency. And interestingly, for those of you who don't know Melissa, she's with an organization who we've known for a long time that's anchored by a little-known guy in the industry called Steve the Hurricane, and the company's always been Hurricane Marketing Enterprises. And the main website has been homecaremarketing.net. And interestingly, they are going through an adaptation of their own. And I actually attended their last home care marketing boot camp, which was in November. And there was all this buildup that this is going to be the last boot camp ever. And it turns out what the announcement was, is it's not really going to be the last conference, or officially, boot camp, but really what has happened in the organization is that they said, hey, we are providing so many services. We're helping home care agencies with recruiting and retention and really driving their business by the numbers, and even how to sell and exit their business and all that kind of thing. So there's going to be a big announcement that you'll be hearing about coming out very soon, that the new branding of the company is going to be Home Care Evolution. And instead of home care marketing boot camps, we're going to have Home Care Evolution conferences. And there's going to be a really big one in June of this year. So we'll bring you some more details of that. But without further ado, let me introduce our special guest today, Melissa Bagley. Melissa, how are you today?
Hi, thank you. I'm doing well. How are you?
Excellent. And where are you joining us from today?
I am actually in my home office in Jacksonville, Florida.
Wow, good for you. And is that where you normally hail from?
Is that normally where what?
Are you I know that one of the things that Steve talked about was how you adapted, for example, to COVID, and that,
right.
Certain people are in the office on certain days of the week and things like that. But are you often in the headquarters, or do you usually work from Jacksonville?
So our headquarters are in New Jersey.
Right.
Frankly, I've never been to our office, and I worked for them for 2 years. We all the coaches work from home, so we live all over Texas and Utah, New Jersey, Florida. We're all over the place now. So no, I have not been to the office. So I work here every day.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, that's great to know that you're in sunny Florida today. And I know that as we're recording this, it was kind of cold in Florida a couple of weeks ago, but it's back to its sunny warmth now. So
yeah,
so good for you.
Everyone thinks it's warm here. It's in the 50s. It is still cold to us.
Okay. Yeah, well, I am in Massachusetts, and we are recording this in the month of February. We had around 30 inches of snow, 2 weekends ago. So you're not getting a lot of sympathy from me with your horribly cold temperatures in the 50s.
That's right.
All right, so it's great. I mean, this is really, you're practicing what you preach, right? So you're adapting your organization to be all about home care evolution, and the boot camps won't be marketing boot camps, but they'll be really evolution boot camps moving forward. And I think in the warm-up you were talking about, it's about adopting and transforming, and and these new tools that you need for thriving. And so what I wanted to do on the podcast today was talk about that whole theme, and maybe cover 3 aspects of adopting your organization, your home care agency, to the current realities. And with that, I was wondering if you had a few deeper dive topics that we might, jump into.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I think with adapting, definitely something that we have incorporated are, being numbers driven, collaboration, even thriving. I think those would be 3 really good topics to discuss today.
Okay, I think those are great topics. And without further ado, let's jump right in. So you talk about being numbers driven, and I know that we all love Home Care Pulse, and a lot of things that come out of Home Care Pulse. There's there's a lot of numbers that come out, and a lot of measurements and things like that. But when you talk about numbers driven, are you saying essentially that these agencies should really kind of know what their current numbers are and the numbers that they're striving for and things like that? And if so, like what would some of those key measurements be that they should really be knowing off the top of their head?
Yes, no, absolutely. And it's crazy, to even think about this, but I talk to home care owners all the time that do not know their numbers. You ask them what their revenue is, what their hours are, and they're like, oh, let me look it up. And it just surprises me because, we all want to grow and get to the next level. If you're not, tracking and knowing your numbers currently, how are you ever going to get to that? How are you going to change your plan of action, so to speak? So that is definitely something that being numbers driven, where you're looking at those KPIs and you're talking about it with your team. I think that is one of the most important things that is missing, is people aren't talking about it. And I like to use the analogy of going to any sort of sports game, but we'll use football, for example. If you go to a football game, everyone knows what the score is. We know how many more touchdowns we need to get in order to win. And we talk about it. They have huddles, right? And so the coach is huddling with their team and putting that plan of action together. And that's what we need to be doing as home care owners and agencies. We need to set up that goal for our team and know, what do we need to do? This is our annual goal. Break it down monthly, then look at it on a weekly basis. And every day have, 5-10 minute stand-up huddle where you're putting together that plan of action. And how are we going to get to that goal? If you're not talking about it, you're probably not going to get to it because you just don't know where you're at, right?
Yeah, so that sounds perfect. Yeah, and then I guess I was just going to re-ask the part about, so let's say I'm a home care owner and I'm like, Melissa, I think you're really right. I've been thinking about this, but, I don't really have certain numbers that we're talking about on a daily basis. If I was going to start with 3, 4, or 5, key numbers, what would they be?
So the top 3 that come to my head, obviously, is revenue and hours. You want to know, what's your revenue and hours? Granted, that is important, but you could be, a $5 million company, but losing money, right? So gross profit margin is equally as important. If looking at that gross profit margin, and we recommend keeping it between a 35 to 50% range, 40 is ideal. That's where you're going to really thrive the most, is being at that 40% gross profit margin.
Okay. So great. So, I mean, if I knew off the top of my head that, we're doing, whatever it is, we're doing, like, 4,000 hours a week, and we're striving to go to this, and our revenue is that. But also, now when we talk about gross margin, let's dig into that one a little bit. So we have what we're charging for our service, and then what we're paying our caregiver for the service, but then we have all these other expenses. We have to pay for insurance and pay for our office and pay for our office staff and things like that. So how do we calculate gross margin?
That is a really, really great question. So gross profit margin really is only looking at, how much do your services cost, and what are you paying your caregivers? And so the way you can come up with that is finding those two numbers and dividing it. So you want to, and something we recommend is, if you're going to pay your caregivers, let's say $15 an hour, you should be charging $30 for your service per hour. And that's going to get you at that 40% gross profit margin.
Okay, yeah. So that's a really, really good thought. So I know that one of the things that came out of the Home Care Pulse report that Steve talked about a lot, that I guess was the 2020 report that came out in 2021, I always get that a little confused, was that, really the amount that we have to pay our caregivers has been going up. I mean, for a lot of reasons. So there's just, supply and demand issues and competing with other agencies. And then we did have, with the COVID crisis, some caregivers elected not to work. So we had a reduced, kind of pool. But I guess one of the big things that Steve talked about and really emphasized a lot was that the amount that agencies were paying their caregivers, went up for all these reasons I touted, but that agencies weren't raising their prices that they were charging their consumers. And that's kind of a recipe for, shrinking gross profit margins and that sort of thing. So I like what you're saying. And then do you, you might have already shared it again, but what did you say is a rule of thumb? So let's say that I am paying my caregivers, like $14 an hour, right? So that's kind of where I am. So then on average, if I'm paying 14 an hour, what should I be charging in order to hit that, let's say 40% ideal gross profit margin?
We typically say double. So if you're paying your caregiver 14, then you would want to charge 28 per hour. And something to remember too with coming up with gross profit margin, if you could be paying your caregivers, 14 an hour, but if they're going into overtime and you're now having to pay them an hour and a half, that's going to skew your gross profit margin. So really monitoring your overtime, your holiday pay, things of that sort.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so that's something we really have to be very cognizant of, is that, if we're paying our caregiver 14 an hour and we're charging 28 an hour, but we're in regular time, not overtime, then we have probably out of that profit that we're making per hour, we have enough to pay for our office and our insurance and our overhead and our taxes and all those kinds of things. But if we are, getting into that $21 an hour situation because of overtime, then we're probably in trouble. So we do have to be very cognizant of that. Okay, perfect. And then again, you just talked about, kind of revenue and the growth of revenue. So I do know that a lot of agency owners, when, we sell home care software, and, we always start by asking the prospect about, their story. And I could always tell that if the first thing they say is, we're providing non-medical home care and we're doing this many hours per week, I kind of know right away, okay, these guys are on their game. They sort of know where they are, and they could say, this is where we've come from. So, we started the agency at this time, we're currently at this number of hours, we're trying to drive to the next level. So I think that's about it. And, so I guess to recap this part, it's all about, if I know, my revenue, so I know what I'm charging, I know how many hours I have, because that, there's kind of a one-to-one correspondence there. And then, very, very importantly, given that the rates for caregivers are going up, we need to make those corresponding changes. And that's what's going to improve, really improve and, have us be very, very cognizant of that gross profit margin, that those are the big things. And a great number to shoot for is 40%. And I guess, do you happen to know, sorry to put you on the spot here, but do you happen to know what the demand for home care services is expected to, be, for example, do we expect that the demand for home care is going up a certain percentage per year? Yeah.
Absolutely. I don't know the exact percentage off the top of my head, but yes, home care is thriving so much. Everyone is really utilizing home care more than they ever have. And really, it started right when COVID hit. Well, I guess I should back up. It's been trending upwards, but it really hit when COVID came, because everyone wanted to stay at home, right? So if seniors went to the hospital, they would typically go to skilled rehab maybe for a couple of weeks. But during that time, they're like, I don't want to go to skilled rehab. That's where I'm going to get COVID. So they decided to go home. Or maybe they went to a rehab and they would transition into an assisted living. And now they're thinking, oh, don't want to go into an assisted living. It's going to be locked down and I can't see my family. I'm going to go home. Right. So everyone is going home. And even though that has, as things opened up and COVID's getting a little bit better, I should say, we're still keeping that home in there. And I think we're seeing the value, companies have seen the value during COVID that home care truly has had on our industry. We're the glue that holds everyone together. We're the eyes and ears in the home to help all of those vendors that are providing care to the clients that we're providing care to. So really utilizing home care has been a huge advantage in the industry, and it is absolutely increasing.
Yeah, fantastic. I actually, for those of you who are going to be watching this on YouTube as a video, I'm going to go really quick to a couple of graphics. And so here I'm sharing a screen. And for those of you who are just listening on a podcast, you won't see this, but I'm showing a graph of Americans over the age of 80. And what I'm seeing is that here we are in 2022, and it looks like, according to this graph, we're right around 14 million Americans who are over the age of 80. And if you extrapolate this out, we have this whole baby boomer generation who's really not quite ready for home care yet. I mean, most people, they say, oh, the baby boomers are retiring. But, when people turn 65, they're young and vibrant and they're healthy and they're not ready for home care. So looking at people over 80 is a really, really good barometer of how big our industry is. But between, today in 2022, and if we look out to, let's say, 2040 or 2042, we're going to go from 14 million to over 30 million people in the home care age. So I think that that's a pretty important, kind of number that really shows that our industry is poised to double, and it's a great industry to be in. So I stopped sharing the screen now, and we'll get back to Melissa. But I think that's great for our first point today, is to be really, really numbers driven, and that's fantastic. So I guess the next thing I was thinking of, talking about, following your outline, was you kind of used this word collaboration, and you said, okay, so now I guess the idea is we have these numbers that we're trying to strive for, revenue hours per week, or, gross margins and things like that. So what do you mean by collaboration in the home care agency? Can you talk more about that?
Absolutely. I think, in talking with my clients and other home care owners, if they are putting together goals, let's say, they are doing more so of individual goals, right? So we're working very independently, where we have the recruiter, they've got their goal for the week maybe is 10, they have to recruit 10 caregivers. The goal for the marketer is 10 referrals. So we have all of these goals. The scheduler, they've got to, their goal is to schedule all those open cases. So we have these individual goals, which, we think, obviously, we're working hard. We're obviously doing what we're supposed to be doing in the home care agency. And that just isn't the case, because we're working hard, but not necessarily working smart. And so, by creating those numbers and having that goal in mind, that's coming up with that process. So we have a guide and a vision of what we want, right? And so now we all need to be on the same page, and that's that collaboration part. And so we need to be collaborating together on figuring out, how can we get to this goal? So the 10 referrals that marketer is bringing in, are those going to be referrals that will be ones of the caregivers, those 10 caregivers that the recruiter's bringing in are going to want, and vice versa. So that's, by collaborating and having those daily conversations of, hey, we need to get to this goal. We need, 2 more 24/7s, to get to our goal this week. What do we need to do in order to achieve that? It's not necessarily hiring 5 caregivers. It's hiring maybe 3 caregivers in this area, because you have referrals that can start in that area.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, individual goals. If I am a marketer, it's all about, well, how many folks called us on the phone? How many times do we go out and try to do an evaluation and quote some services for them and things like that? And then if I'm that recruiter, it's like, okay, well, how many applicants are you getting? How many are coming in for interviews? What's your thing? But if those are out of balance, you have, you could have chaos. As a matter of fact, one of the people we've had on the podcast before, and we actually also were together at the last Hurricane Marketing Summit, was a guy named Cameron Nasser, and he used to run a home care agency, and he also wrote a book about his experience there. And he said that when he was a small agency, that they could really only focus on one thing at a time. So they focus on, hey, we need more clients, so let's go out and get clients. And they would find they didn't have caregivers to fill the cases, and that caused them to stall. And then then they'd say, oh, okay, let's focus on getting caregivers, and then they wouldn't have clients to to kind of have cases for those caregivers. And of course, caregivers, what do they want? They want hours, right?
That's right. Yes.
I want to support my life, and I need to work 32 hours a week, or I need to work 40 hours a week or whatever the case may be. So then what he said is like, once they got a little bit bigger, they got over $1 million and they, kind of got their staff and they set these goals and they got them together, then it really became, more of a harmonious thing where we're trying to, really be in sync on the neighborhoods we're recruiting for, the languages we're recruiting for. And that's when they really started experiencing very, very fast and astronomical growth. So I think that that's a great example and a timeless one, but probably, more timely today with the, issues of finding caregivers than ever before.
Absolutely. It's really being more strategic, right?
Yeah. Yeah, really, really strategic. That is it. Okay. Well, I think we covered that one pretty well. And I understand now, the goals and then, also just keep in mind, I mean, we've covered sort of the obvious ones, getting caregivers and getting clients, and that's sort of the lifeblood of our agency. But, don't forget those back office things, compliance, and, making sure that, all of those things you need to do for your state and those, evaluations, reevaluations, being ready for audits, those things, don't forget about those things as well. And those have to be in balance as well. And, sometimes you get to the point where your, internal processes aren't, really up to the growth that you're facing. So make sure that, all the players in the organization are collaborating. And I feel like, I mean, you kind of threw out, collaborating and thriving. And I guess the first things that come into mind with, really thriving, especially when you're growing, are, really having processes and policies and procedures. I mean, is that what you kind of had in mind with thriving?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because you need a process in place in order to achieve and get to that, the goal that you're wanting. And by doing that, what's your process? Your process is going to be collaborating and working as a team and putting that plan of action into place in order to get to that goal. And, keeping it strategic and, you obviously want to change those processes as things, change, which you want to adapt, right? And that's something that you need to be going over with your team. So if you don't have those processes in place, an employee handbook, a learning ladder for your caregivers, what it looks like to onboard, what it looks like to train someone. So all of these things need to be standard, and they can be growing and adapting as the times change. But if you don't have that in place, you're not going to be able to achieve successfully the goals that you have in mind. So everyone talks about, oh, we need to retain our caregivers. Well, how are you going to do that? And how are you going to do that effectively and consistently, right? Because if you're going to continue to grow, maybe you're going to grow and you're going to open up new offices. If you're at one office, are they going to be operating the same as the other office? And that's where those protocols and the handbooks and all of those things really do come into play, as well as your state and local requirements and rules. You want to make sure that you are following that. I do talk to many people that they'll tell me something and I'm like, ooh, I don't think that is legal. So you definitely want to keep up with those things as well, to make sure that you are doing the best for your employees, your caregivers, and your clients.
Yeah, fantastic. We didn't really prep for this topic, but I know that it's one that I actually learned about from Steve myself, and I'm sure you could talk about it a little bit. But you talked about having that growth ladder and that onboarding set of skills and things for caregivers. But then one of the things that sounds like it's working really, really well is that to be able to have a career path for your best caregivers. And I believe that the terminology that was used, I might have it wrong, was that they're kind of more like your field coordinators. Was that about right?
Yeah, and I've heard so many different names for this. You're exactly right. Field coordinators, caregiver lead, caregiver mentor, whatever it might be. But yes, it's promoting the best caregiver that you've had and making them a full-time employee, giving them the same hours. So now we're going to have you work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 12-hour days, and you're always going to have these hours. So now you're giving them a security, really, and that's something that every person, let alone a caregiver, wants. And that's why, they're leaving. That's why you have those revolving doors, because they don't feel secure with you. They're not getting what they want with you. And so they're going to keep looking for it with other companies until they find that. So if you can take these amazing caregivers that you have molded, trained, and, they're performing these amazing services to your clients, you want to keep them, right? You spent so much money and time with them. And so how can you do that? Promote them to one of you, to this position, no matter what you call it.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I think this is really the subject of a future podcast. We're probably going to have to bring this one down, but some of the things that when Steve talked about this, he talked about, so first of all, you're retaining these great folks, but what goes wrong in a home care agency is, like, when people need home care for the first time, they need it right away. Mom fell, she broke her hip, she's being discharged. And, and if you say, oh, well, we could probably find a caregiver in the next 2 weeks, I mean, you're out of the game, right? So one of the things that they talked about was, if you have these more senior people, it's like, we could be in your house in an hour to assess the situation. And then when you're trying to fill those, fill that case right away, it's like, you know what? Your mom's being discharged tomorrow. We're going to put one of our, senior people there, with your mom. And so we're ready to take your case as soon as your mom is discharged. And then from there, we're going to find the best, ongoing caregiver that is really matched. We'll get to know her personality and this kind of thing. And then, so right there, I mean, the fact that you can send somebody who could go do an evaluation of a potential new client, like within an hour, and that you can staff cases with these folks. And by the way, then the main job is also, helping onboard those new caregivers and visiting them and visiting the clients on a regular basis, and even being able to charge for that. So I think that will be a great next podcast.
You nailed it. Yes, that is absolutely something that we are hitting hard on this year. And that's essential, having that, because what you just said is needed. People are, wanting to start immediately. Not everyone maybe, but you're able to put your company at a monopoly, so to speak. Like, no other company is doing this because they don't have these people, but your company can. So, with that being said, with being at maybe the only one there, that monopoly, you're able to charge more, and because you're providing a different a value of immediate, you're getting that immediate result, and no other company is able to do that. So if they need it, they have to have it, they're going to pay for it, right? And so that validates those rates that you've increased. You've increased the rate. Maybe you have a new client service fee, whatever it may be. All of these things are essential with, being able to provide that immediate care, being able to grow. This is what we need in order to grow and adapt and get to that next level, right?
That is it. So yeah, this is really exciting. I think we will do a whole dedicated podcast to that next, and maybe I'll be lucky enough to get Melissa back, or one of the other team members from over there in the Steve the Hurricane world. Yes. But with that, I think that I think we really nailed this one. I mean, we talked about adaptation. We covered, really driving your agency by the numbers, having everybody collaborate around hitting those numbers, and then really having the structures and the processes in place to grow. And we called that thriving. And so I think that's great. And we'll get this, podcast out on the airwaves very, very quickly. But, with that, I did, introduce this episode by talking about how, your organization is now going to be all about, home care evolution by Hurricane Marketing, or, by Steve the Hurricane. We'll have to understand exactly what the branding is, which is being rolled out as we go. But if I wanted to come to, a live one of these home care evolution conferences, like when might one of those happen?
Yes, we have a live one that is going to be in June. That is got June 22nd to the 24th. Had to remember that one. It's going to be in the New York area. And that is going to be an amazing conference where, like you said, you're going to be able to see us in person and learn exactly what you need structurally, whether that's operations, marketing, recruiting, financial, and even setting your business up for that, having that exit plan. We do have a virtual workshop that's coming up at the end of February 24th to the 25th. There's a couple, I think we got 20 spots that are left at this point. So that in itself is going to be, very informative to help you kick off the new year. So I would recommend registering and reserving a spot for that. And then another thing I didn't even mention to you yet, we have actually developed and created, this is a project of mine that I've been working with Steve on. We have the Home Care Evolution Quarterly Magazine that is going to be coming out. Yes, so we're going to have tons of information that's going to help you with everything that we're encompassing. We're going to have testimonials, some of our clients, some experts in the industry. We'll even have you at some point write an article and give our followers the guidance and advice that they're striving to find. So
Perfect.
Definitely look out for that. And you have been you're the first one we've told about both these things, our new name and our magazine. So
wow. So it's gonna be breaking news coming out on the Home Care Heroes podcast. So
exactly.
We're very
You heard it first.
exciting. All right. So that's really, really good. And then, so I don't want to put you on the spot, but at various times in the past, I know that your fine organization has been able to offer up, like if somebody's like, hey, I don't know what to do, like that, Steve has sometimes said that he'll even, set aside a few number of slots for somebody to talk to one of the coaches there for a short period of time. Is that something that is like ongoing, or would they have to?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. If you have if anything is, you're like, oh, I'm interested in learning more about that, please give us a call. We will set up a complimentary strategy session with one of our coaches, and we'll go over, where are you at, where are you wanting to be at? And we help all stages, home care companies that are just opening up, home care companies that want to get to the next level. So that getting over those humps, right? You're plateauing and you've been at that spot for years. What do you need to do? We have mastered that as well. And then also exiting. So we can help with anything. And like I said, no matter where you're at, where your company's at, definitely give us a call and we'll be happy to give you that complimentary strategy session.
Perfect. So I guess of our audience, some are going to be phone call people, some are going to be email people. So could you give me a phone number and an email?
Absolutely. So phone numbers, I'm going to give you our main office number. It's 848-444-9865. And for those websites, I'm going to give you two actually, just because like with our rebranding, we're actually going live next week with that. So our old website, and whether you go to any one of these, it'll redirect you to the right place. But homecaremarketing.net is our going to be our old one. It's current this week, but going to be next, not current next week. And then homecareevolution.com is going to be what it is moving forward.
Amazing. I love that. I'm writing that down. Okay, so I'm just going to recap those. So they are homecaremarketing.net, homecareevolution.com, and also the phone number is 848-444-9865. And you are able to book a free consultation session with one of the fine coaches like Melissa. And with that, we're going to thank you again for being on this episode of Home Care Heroes. And we look forward to all of these great things that are coming up, including the live conferences and the quarterly magazine, and fantastic. So thanks one more time, Melissa Bagley.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
All right, have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks for joining us today on the Home Care Heroes podcast. Home Care Heroes is produced by Ancoda, the software for the heroes of home care. You can listen to back episodes by visiting forhomecareheroes.com. That's the number 4, then the words homecareheroes.com.